العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. You guys hear me clearly or is it a bit quiet now?
A bit quiet, but it's all right.
Okay. Um, so this we have in front of us. I haven't read it all myself, um, but it's basically just an overview of all those Usool Ul Fiqh books. In English, obviously. The terminology here is a bit difficult,
Okay.
and it might sometimes be easier to stick to the Arabic for some words, but we'll see as we go along.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's quite long, but it's short compared to other books. I've got Dr. Wahab Zuhaili's book. It's called Al Wajiz fi Usul Al Fiqh, and that's got a lot of examples, but we'll see how it goes, inshallah. So,
Al-Wajiz.
the beginning is just saying about when Usul Al Fiqh started, what is Usul Al Fiqh, what are the branches of Usul Al Fiqh, and then he's going through basically the different books of Usul Al Fiqh. So there's old books and there's new books. The old books are basically books like Abdul Wahhab al Khallaf's Ilm Usul Al Fiqh, Abu Zahra's Usul Al Fiqh, Muhammad al Qudari's Usul Al Fiqh, Badran's Usul Al Fiqh al Islami, and he missed out Dr. Wahab al Zuhaili, but he said later on he used that, but I don't know why he's not mentioned it here. Um, Ghazali's Al Mustasfa min Ilm al Usul, that's a really important work on Usul al Fiqh in the Shafi school. Al-Amidi al-Ahkam fi Usul al-Ahkam. So they say that the two scholars who are the final point of call when it comes to Shafi fiqh, one is Al-Amidi and the other one is Al-Nawawi. However they say that's basically they're the hujjah fil madhab in the Shafi. However they say that's what the mutaakhirin say. Then you have Shafi's al-Muwafaqat fi Usul al-Ahkam. I've got this as well. Uh,
Yeah, I was gonna buy that.
al-Muwafaqat.
Should we get it?
It's quite a difficult work. It's basically people get it. It's I can remember once Dr. Kamadwi came to Manchester and we attended and the whole talk. I think it was a day or two days. He was going through the points from this book, selected points from this book. People say that this is the basis for Maqasid al-Sharia.
Right.
But it's basically when you read the book, you can tell.
That's what it starts with, right? Mufasir Sharia.
Yeah, when you read the book yourself, you can see that Ashanti is quite against Maqasid Sharia and using that as a ruling for Sharia. But this name Muwafaqat came to him in a dream. He saw a dream. He was meant to call the book something else. He changed it in the end to this. It's quite rare.
Sheikh, is that Saifuddin Amidi?
He's a famous Shafi scholar.
Yeah.
He's in the level of a Nawawi. Then you have I've got a bit of a background noise from one of you guys. Is it? Okay, he's done now. So, three, you just mentioned like how Usul al Fiqh, old and new, how they came about, the different scholars. So, as for substantial matters, the model works are normally expected to preserve the continuity of the early authorities.
Yep.
In Islam, basically, you don't reinvent the wheel, you add to previous work. That's what he's trying to say. And then you have doctrines such as the Mu'tazila, Shia, and Zahiriya schools, and they all have their own merit. You know a Zahiri scholar,
Yeah. Ibn Hazm.
Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, he traveled the path of Dawud al-Zahiri.
Yeah.
Okay. This is basically to itself. It's just an introduction to what the Western scholars look at Usul al-Fiqh for. So basically, Usul al-Fiqh, Usul means definition. Usul means dalil. معناه أدلة الفقه. أصول الفقه معناه أدلة الفقه. So أصول الفقه basically means the proofs of fiqh. And they are basically rules that the mujtahid uses to extract rulings of the Sharia that can be applied from really distinctive proofs. So القواعد التي يتوصل بها المجتهد إلى استنباط الأحكام الشرعية العملية من أدلتها التفصيلية. وقواعد. قواعد are basically golden rules. They're general in nature and they encompass many minor rulings. هي الضوابط الكلية العامة التي تشتمل على أحكام جزئية. For example, the rules مثل قاعدة الأمر للوجوب والنهي للتحريم. So an example of a قاعدة, the rule is that the command is generally for obligation and the prohibition is generally for prescription, which means that you're not allowed to do it.
Ustad, would you say Al-Qawa'id Al-Fiqhiyya, the book, is a good one to read?
There's so many books called قواعد الفقهية.
There's one that we've got from the library by Shahrul Hassan.
Oh, yeah, yeah, the Maxims one.
Yeah, the treasure of sacred maxims. Is that a good one? Are these commonly used, or are the different qawa'id amongst the different schools?
This Dr. Sharul Hassan. I'm with him on this WhatsApp group. I can remember he was a really good scholar. He's really like really open-minded, really knows what he's talking about. He's really guy.
So
So
are the qawa'id, are they kind of universal? Do all the different schools use them?
no, some qawaid are, some qawaid aren't. Some qawaid are mixed between different schools. You'll find out. It'll be in this book at the end, or
Right.
it'll be here. So, general what a qaida is, it's basically something that is applied for generally. And that's what usulis do. They use general rulings and then they make distinctions from them and they derive things from them. For example, Allah says in the Quran, Aqimus salata wa atu zakah. So that's a command that the prayer is an obligation and zakat is an obligation. Allah also says in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Do not kill a soul that Allah has made prohibited for you except if there was a right to do so. So you're not allowed to kill. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Again, it's haram to sort of commit fornication through this. So who's a mujtahid? A mujtahid does this. So who is a mujtahid?
Mujtahid is the faqih, is the one who can perform istinbat.
Hmm. فالمجتهد الذي لديه ملكة الاجتهاد وهو الذي يتمكن من استخدام هذه القواعد وجعلها طريقا لفهم الأحكام واستفادتها من الأدلة. So a mujtahid is the person who has the tools of ijtihad and he can use these tools to extrapolate these rulings and make them a framework to understand the rulings of Sharia and and are taking benefit from the actual dalils, adillah, so taking benefit from the proof. So ahkam is basically the fruit of istinbat. So here, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, the science of Usool Ul Fiqh is basically given an analogy here. It's a famous analogy that the asal is basically the tree, right? The samara are the fruits from that tree, and they're the rulings, the ahkam. And then you have the person, the rules of interpretation, which is al istinbat, and then dalalat. Istinbat is like the method of how you pick, and the mujtahid is the picker, the person who picks the fruit. So
Right.
it's an analogy to remember these four things, right? So here's a good diagram.
So you said the sources. What was that in Arabic? You had the ahkam was the fruit.
Dalail or usul. Asal is the usul of the sources.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, Basically, with this, again, istinbat. You know what istinbat means? What is it? Which bab is it from?
Istif'al.
Istif'al. What does it mean? What's the root letters for it?
Button in it.
Button. Button. So you're checking what's button in Arabic. What does it mean in English?
The tummy in it.
Stomach.
The stomach. But here it means batin, to see what's inside. Right,
Yeah.
the hidden thing. Button is basically inside your body, so you can't see the button, can you?
Yeah. You told us about the classical way it was used about the guy who can tell, but from the camel, which one is
Or what is it?
no, the istinbat. Remember you said the faqih.
So the faqih before the English language, before the Arabic language was used for the Sharia, before that the faqih was someone he could
Could
do
do istinbat.
he istanbata. He could check what was in the button of the she camel, but just looking at it, he could tell the pregnant she camel from the non-pregnant she camel. That's how nuanced the guy is because he can check, he can see just by the outward appearance what's right inside. So that's like a mujtahid. A faqih is like a mujtahid who can actually see what's right inside the text, which is the scripture, from just looking at the surface of it, because
Right.
it's quite deep. And sometimes what's on the surface doesn't match the reality of things. You have usul al-fiqh, you have al-hukam, you have two types of hukum taklifi, defining law, hukum wad'i, declaratory law. Then you have sources, adilla naqliya, so transmitted sources, and adilla aqliya, which are rational sources. Naqliya, the adilla naqliya of the Quran and the Sunnah and ijma and fatwa of companions. And you have adilla aqliya, which is qiyas, and from qiyas you have subtypes of qiyas, which is istihsan. We spoke about that, equity. We'll come in detail. Then you have considerations of public interest, which is
Istislah.
maslaha, and then you have customs, which is ada, and then you have presumptions of continuity, like what's presumptions of continuity? I think it's istishab. Yeah.
Right.
Rules of interpretation, istinbat. You have dalala, implications, which are commands and prohibitions. You have general, specific, absolute, and qualified. Then you have the mujtahid, the proofs of ijtihad, the conditions, procedure.
Ustad, was that the commands and prohibitions, the general procedure, the ma'rifah, nakira, mutlaq, and muqayyad?
It's not marifa and nakira. You don't use them
I
in
mean, no, Aam and Khas, and then you have Mutlaq and Muqayyad.
yeah, yeah.
Is
Khas.
that what this is? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, basically this thing.
Right.
This is basically just an overview, giving you an overview of what's coming in the book.
Yeah. Before we dive in,
Yeah, you guys, one of you guys want to read?
Yasin will read, inshallah.
Okay, then, bismillah.
Bismillah. These indications are found mainly in the Quran and Sunnah, which are principal sources of the Sharia. The rules of fiqh are thus derived from the Quran and Sunnah in conformity with the body of principles and methods which are collectively known as Usool Ul Fiqh.
Yeah.
You can carry on.
The methodology of Usool Ul Fiqh really refers to methods of reasoning such as analogy, juristic preference, presumption of continuity, and the rules of interpretation and deduction. To deduce the rules of fiqh from the indications that are provided in the sources is the expressed purpose of usul al-fiqh. Fiqh as such is the end product of usul al-fiqh, and yet the two are separate disciplines. Fiqh, in other words, is the law itself, whereas usul al-fiqh is the methodology of the law. The relationship between the two disciplines resembles that of the rules of grammar to a language, or of logic, mantiq to philosophy.
Yeah. So basically, it's just making a distinction between fiqh and usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh is the thing, is a tool that you use to get the rulings out, and fiqh is basically those rulings that you have in the end. So basically, what is the definition for an usuli? What is his concern? The concern of the usuli, the wazifatul usuli, is البحث عن القواعد الكلية التي تؤدي إلى استنباط الأحكام الجزئية. You guys know that? Which is basically extracting these general rules and knowing and understanding these themes, recognizing themes that are in the Quran and Hadith, and basically using this as why. Quite every verse they read when it comes to ahkam, they question, why did Allah say this? What is the reasons for Allah and the Messenger saying this particular thing in the scripture? And then they extrapolate from that golden rules. So كل حكم على حدة من دليله الوارد فيه. So this is what the usuli is concerned with. So the subject of usul al-fiqh is two things. One of them is أدلة الشريعة من حيث كونها أداة الاستنباط. So the proofs of Sharia in terms of them being the tools for his istinbat. And the second thing that the objective of usuli is al-ahkam al-sharia min hayth kawniha natijatul istinbat. That the end product of Sharia in terms of them being the results of his istinbat. فأنها تثبت بالأدلة. And this is basically the nadriya of most of the usuliyin.
Right.
So what is fiqh? What is fiqh? It's mentioned here actually. Go on, you can read on.
Fiqh is the end product of usul al-fiqh.
Yeah. So you can read from the book now. It just says the definition of fiqh.
Okay. Knowledge of the practical rules of Sharia acquired from the detailed evidence in the sources.
So the detailed evidence, the adilla to tafsiliyah, which is basically the scripture, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Qiyas. And there's other things as well, which according to different schools of fiqh, which will be mentioned for later on, should be. Okay.
Okay.
So Dalil Tafsili is the Quran, Sunnah, that stuff, yeah?
Yeah. Scripture. So the knowledge
Scripture.
of the rules, you can carry on.
And the knowledge of the rules of fiqh, in other words, must be acquired directly from the sources, a requirement which implies that the faqih must be in contact with the sources of fiqh. Consequently, a person who learns the fiqh in isolation from its sources is not a faqih. The faqih must know not only the rule that misappropriating the property of others is forbidden, but also the detailed evidence for it in the source. That is the Quranic ayah, which provides devour not each other's property in
وَلَا
defiance
تَأْكُلُوا
of them.
أَمْوَالَ النَّاسِ بِالْبَاطِلِ.
Yeah. So the faqih doesn't just know the rule that you shouldn't eat of someone else's property, or you shouldn't take ownership of someone else's property without their permission. The faqih doesn't know that. The faqih also knows the dalil for that. And back in the and I think in previously before this modern day and age, the faqih was your dalil. So you wouldn't the faqih would be knowing of the dalil, but just because the faqih said it, that would be enough dalil for you. But obviously,
Ah.
in academic circles, you would need the dalil also. So ولا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل, right? So this is this. So the faqih not only knows the rule, he knows the evidence as well.
So he knows the ahkam and the adillah.
Yeah. والعلم بالأحكام الشرعية العملية المكتسب من أدلتها التفصيلية.
Ustad, what are you quoting?
Uh,
Al-Wajiz.
الوجيز
What's
في
this?
yeah. I'll send you the link afterwards. الوجيز في أصول الفقه, or you can take a look if you want now.
Roger, that's so quick, man.
Basically, it's not this one. There's two. There's Abdul Karim Zaidan. I'm not using his. I've got his somewhere. I'm not using his. I'm using the Dr. Wahba Zuhaili. It's this one. Okay? You can check this afterwards. I'll send down the thing. Okay. So, stealing is haram. That's a rule. But the faqih also knows وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا. So the objective of usul is for the mukallaf هو فعل المكلف من حيث ما يثبت له من الأحكام الشرعية. And the faqih is the person who actually discusses في
Yeah.
أنشطة والذي يبحث في أنشطة وأفعال المكلف من بيع وإجارة ورهن ووكالة وصلاة وصوم وإقرار وشهادة ووصية ووقف وجريمة من قتل وقذف وسرقة وزنا وأكل المال بالباطل. So the faqih is the person who discusses all these minor rulings and the implications that they have. So what is the point of understanding usul al-fiqh? So the point is إن الهدف الأصولي من علم أصول الفقه, this is to understand the tools of اجتهاد. هو تمكين المجتهد من تطبيق قواعده لأخذ الأحكام الشرعية العملية من أدلة التفصيلية, because there needs to always be people who are ready to extract the rulings from Quran and Hadith in the future, because new situations will arise that haven't had happened before and don't have scriptural precedent. So what do? They have to resort to usul. That's why it's important that usulis are there in every generation, and this is the whole point of learning usul.
So, Ustad, why is it that we see that, fiqh is supposed to be dynamic, but it isn't so dynamic nowadays? We're living off old rulings and stuff like that.
That's the thing in it. It shouldn't be like that. It should
Who
be.
are the usulis today?
Of course, you don't reinvent the wheel, but at the same
You
time,
build, not innovate, yeah?
sorry,
You build and not innovate.
yeah, you build. I mean, you innovate in the sense that you do come up with new ideas, you critique what came in the past, and you think is that applicable. That's
Yeah.
fine. But I mean, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can build on what's already there. right? But it's still a form of like you're innovating in a way. Obviously, you're not being
Yeah, yeah.
up to date, but at the same time you are. So, in the first thing we have to understand and to be able to apply the rulings of usul al-fiqh, that's the whole point we learn it. The second one, a reason why we learn usul al-fiqh is for those who don't have the capacity for ijtihad, they actually understand the process of istinbat, right? And the way that rulings are derived, right? And then by them understanding this, they can compare the different opinions of the fuqaha and their sort of proofs when it comes to different situations, and they can prefer one opinion over the other. This is the second reason for learning usul al-fiqh. So one is that you do usul ijtihad yourself, and you take rulings of the Quran and Hadith, and you can act upon use qiyas, istihsan, istisla, istishab, and these sort of things. These tools of ijtihad. If you are capable, if you are not capable, then the second point can be you analyzing appropriately the opinions of the fuqaha and the usulis who came before you, and seeing if those opinions and situations are applicable in different times and in your time. And
That's
you,
for the non-mujtahid, yeah.
yeah, and you can prefer one opinion over the other based on the um, based on the strength of the proof.
Yeah.
So وأما الغاية من علم الفقه فهي تطبيق الأحكام الشرعية على أفعال المكلفين من الناس لبيان الحلال من الحرام، فيكون الفقه مرجع العالم والقاضي والمفتي لمعرفة الحكم الشرعي لكل ما يصدر عن الناس من أقوال وأفعال ووقائع ومنازعات. So basically the fiqh is basically the corpus and the reference point for every alim, qadi, mufti, for them to explain what is halal from what is haram. So for them to distinguish, sorry, لبيان الحلال منها والحرام, to distinguish between the permitted from it from the proscribed, which is the haram. Okay. So next, مصدر استمداد أصول الفقه ونشئه وتدوينه وتطوره. This will come in this book. Who founded Usool Ul Fiqh and how it came about, etc. So you can do a read on the founder of Usool Ul Fiqh.
To what extent is it justified to say that Al-Shafi'i was the founder of Usul al-Fiqh? One theory has it that Usul al-Fiqh has existed for as long as the fiqh has been known to exist, for fiqh could not have come into being in the absence of its sources.
Okay.
And of
Basically, so people say that the founder of fiqh was Ash-Shafi'i when he wrote the Risala. He wrote a book called the Risala, and they say this is the foundational book in Al-Mustalah al-Hadith as well as Usul al-Fiqh, because in that book, if you read it, it's quite it's a really beneficial read. I think when you know fiqh a bit more, you can go and resort to that book. It's really beneficial in the sense that he speaks about things that were not spoken about before in terms of they weren't documented before. So
Right.
it says one theory that Usul al-Fiqh existed. Of course it existed. It existed at the time of Imam Abu Hanifa. It existed before him. I
but
think
it wasn't documented.
the Sahabi, because Usul al-Fiqh is generally understanding the Sharia, understanding the Quran, understanding the Hadith,
So that
applying.
was always there in the cognitive sense. It was always there, wasn't it?
That was always there. The concept was always there. But in terms of documentation, they say that the first one was a Shafi'i. But then again, the Hanafis would say that Imam Abu Yusuf, wrote a book called Usul Ul Fiqh, but that didn't reach us. Yeah. So they
So
say
the first person to do tadween, who do we note down, and who's the agreed one? Is it Shafi'i?
so it's not agreed. It's the Shafi'i, and a lot of people will say Shafi'i when he wrote the Risala, but the Hanafis, old Hanafis, will say no, because what it is how do you know a book existed? What do you guys think?
That in fact that it either reached us or people mentioned it.
Yeah, people mentioned it. So early on, the earlier books would have mentioned the usul by Abu Yusuf. But remember, in Islamic history, if you read Islamic history, you know that at one point the rivers of Basra were filled black with the ink books, because the first time the first point where they would go to when they invaded the Muslim lands would be where?
Libraries.
The libraries, to make sure that they don't progress intellectually, because they knew the Muslims were advancing. So they'd hit the libraries first and burn all their books, or burn the libraries, or throw all the books into the oceans and into the rivers. So these guys don't progress, and this is how a lot of books were lost and they didn't reach us. We know that they existed because earlier scholars have mentioned them. Regarding Ash-Shafi'i's Risala as well, once Imam Ahmad, and he used to be a study partner with Ishaq ibn Rahway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when they used to go, they used to like go to different sort of scholars to learn hadith, right? So once they were in Mecca and they used to travel together, they used to be travel partners in terms of study. So when they went to Mecca, they went to the majlis of Sufyan al-Thawri, and they would sit in his majlis. And then Imam Shafi all of a sudden he was also in Mecca. So Imam Ahmad didn't attend the lesson of Thawri. And then Ishaq ibn Rahawi was like, yo, how come you're leaving the majlis of Thawri when you came all the way to acquire knowledge from
Yeah.
him? He said that I'm going to the majlis of this Shafi. And Shafi was one of the kid compared to Ishaq ibn Rahway.
Is
So
he the teacher of Bukhari, that one?
yeah, he was the teacher of Bukhari.
Yeah.
So so what's his name? So
Sha'rawi.
Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said that ما وجدته من علو ما فقدته من علو وجدته في النزول. That whatever I missed from the majlis of Ishaq ibn Rahway in terms of a high sanad, I can just transmit it from you. So whatever hadith that you learn from Sufyan al-Thawri, you can just transmit it to me. But whatever I'm going to miss out from this Shafi'i, I'm never going
Yeah.
to, because he shows you how to distinguish between the authentic and the weak. He shows you the applicability and how to apply the hadith, right?
Oh,
How to apply and how to reject, and the way and methodology and the framework for understanding the actual scripture, which I'm not going to get from Sufyan al-Thawri. So this was how Imam Ahmad preferred this majlis, and this is Shafi'i. That's why they say he was the founder of this, but he was
right,
the first one to sort of pen it down in his books Kitab al and his book Al-Risala. Yeah, so this was that.
right.
So numerous examples.
No, Yasin.
Ah, uh, Numerous examples would be cited to explain how in early Islam the companions deduced the rules of fiqh from their sources. Even before Ash-Shafi'i, we know that Abu Hanifa resorted to the use of analogy and istihsan, while Imam Malik is known for his doctrine of the Madani's ijma', subjects to which we shall have occasion to return.
So Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, that's one thing that he was accused of, al-istihsan, which later on we're going to go back to it again. But istihsan, we mentioned what it was. But people like Ash-Shafi'i, when he looked back at the methodology of Abu Hanifa, when he did istihsan, he mentioned in the Kitab al man istahsana faqad sharra'a. Whoever did
Wow.
istihsan, they have actually legislated. So
Wow.
there was a big sort of discouragement from a Shafi for doing istihsan and the way of Abu Hanifa. So this was Imam Abu Hanifa's specific principle that he had, but of course Maliki scholars did adopt it as well. They called it something else usually though. And Maliki scholars, Imam Malik himself, is known for the Madani's ijma. That's basically the scholars of Ahlul Madina. They overrode the hadith, the textual hadith that reached him. So
Abu Layth, he said he doesn't regard that as ijma, he regards that as sunnah. What would you say about that?
it is a sunnah in a way because sunnah just means the way. At-tariqatul masluka fi din. That's what sunnah basically is.
Yeah, he argued that the Madani's ijma is more authentic than any hadith at all.
So this was what Imam Malik argued. Imam Malik would say a hadith reached him with an authentic sanad, right? He would disregard it because he's like, the person who's transmitting this hadith to me, they're not acting upon it, which can mean several things. It can mean that that was a specific incident. It can mean that that incident later on it was abrogated, meaning the ruling changed regarding it. It can mean several things. So this was Imam Malik's way of thinking, and this
So
is the
the whole alfun and alfun thing, can that not be applied in today's time? Can we not use the same principles, the same sources as the Medina school today?
not really, because how are you going to do that when the whole Islam has spread so much that the Madani's ijma, when people entered into Medina, after times like Imam Malik, there were people from all over the world. So what is Madani's ijma? That comes the question. What do you count as Madani's ijma afterwards?
So there isn't, is that what you're saying?
There
There
isn't.
isn't.
It can't
It's
be.
gone.
Because ijma, the Madani's ijma was the ijma of the Sahaba and the early Tabi'in. then it was gone after that because new people started entering Islam who didn't learn from the Sahaba, who learned from each other. So there was no longer that system there. Although the system was there in transmission, transmitting hadith, it wasn't as clear when it came to practice. So
Right.
you couldn't really recognize what was a Madani's ijma. But people like Imam Malik could. So hadith reached him and he'd be like, nah, I'm not going to act upon this hadith. Why? Because the person who transmitted it, they didn't act upon it themselves. Or the scholars of Ahlul Madinah, they didn't act upon it. But again, we're going to return to that also. Next.
Yeah.
But it was through the works of Ash-Shafi'i that Usul al-Fiqh was articulated into a coherent body of knowledge. He devoted his Risala exclusively to this subject. When the Prophet ﷺ was alive, the necessary guidance and solutions to problems were obtained either through divine revelation or his direct ruling. Similarly, during the period following the demise of the Prophet, can you scroll up a bit, Ustad?
Have you not got it open, Yasin?
No. Similarly, during the period following the demise of the Prophet, the companions remained in close contact with the teachings of the Prophet, and their decisions were mainly inspired by his precedent. How do you say that?
Precedent.
Precedent.
Yeah. But what he
Were
came
made
from.
where he left.
Yeah. President is means what came before. Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
basically, the thing here is that when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, when the people needed rulings, they would go to the Prophet ﷺ and they would get a dalil qat'i. So whatever the Prophet ﷺ said, that was the ruling. There was no room for disagreement there. But after he passed away, that's when there was a need to sort of gather these rulings that the Prophet ﷺ had, and these were his precedent. And his precedent here, I will translate it as his sunnah, right?
Right.
So their proximity to the source and intimate knowledge of the events provided them with the authority to rule on practical problems without there being a pressed need for a methodology. So there was no set methodology at the time for of the Sahaba. Although it can be argued that later on when there was a disagreement, and I'll give you examples later on if it doesn't already come in the book, of Umar bin Khattab and Fatima bin Qais and the talaq issue, right, in the Iddah, where he said, I'm not gonna leave the Kitabullah and the Sunnah of the Messenger Sallallahu for the opinion of a woman. But that incident actually happened with her. We'll discuss it when it comes. But
Right.
what I'm trying to say is basically the Sahaba, there was no need for them to develop this methodology because what they had intimate knowledge of the events. So things that already happened, they could say, okay, this happening now. We can do the same thing that we did when the Prophet ﷺ lived. So there was no need for this methodology. The need for the methodology of Usul al-Fiqh became prominent when unqualified persons attempted to carry out ijtihad. So remember, like I always say, when new people started to come into Islam, Islam spread like wildfire. People started to bring preconceived understandings, like the Greek philosophy, if taken from Europe, different understandings and methodologies, and superimpose that onto Islam, which wasn't correctly done. So
Right.
Shafi'i came into the scene when these controversies happened, and this became known as the school of Ahlul Hadith and Ahlul Rai. So Ahlul Hadith were the people, they were more literal in their understanding. Ahlul Rai were the people of Rai and the people of sort of intellect or reason, the people of reason. So nowadays people will use Ahlul Rai as a derogatory term. They will say that, okay, Ahlul Rai is something bad. But back in then, this was seen as something to do fakhr over. Ahlul Rai, the people who use the God-given faculty of reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed them with, right? And they would do fakhr over this thing. When you read Ahlul Rai in the previous scripture, the previous text, you'll see that it's something to do fakhr over. Although nowadays, like the modern Salafi school, etc., they'll say, oh, Ahlul Rai means you follow whatever your desires. It doesn't mean that. It means that you're a person of reason. You reason, you look at why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said certain things, not just the outward thing. You look right deep inside. And this is actually the point of Usool Ul Fiqh.
But did that not give birth to the Mu'tazili school?
We'll read, it's mentioned here. It should be mentioned here. So finally, amongst the factors which were prompted Al-Shafi'i into refining the legal theory of Usool Al-Fiqh was the extensive influx of non-Arab into Islamic territories. Shi'i ulama claim that their fifth Imam Muhammad al-Baqir and his son Ja'far al-Sadiq were the first to write on the subject of Usul. So this was that's what the Shi'is came, Muhammad al-Baqir. I think he was Ali ibn Ali. Is that him? Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ali.
Muhammad ibn Ali. Who's that? Oh yeah, Muhammad ibn Zayn al-Abidin ibn Hussein ibn Ali. That one, yeah.
Uh,
Muhammad al-Baqir ibn Zayn al-Abidin. That one.
I think that's probably him. So that's where the Ja'fari fiqh, this is where it comes from. Not from Ja'far as-Sadiq, the first one, the Prophet ﷺ's cousin, but Ja'far as-Sadiq, this one, Muhammad ibn Baqir's son.
Not from Ja'far al-Tayyar.
Ja'far al-Tayyar, yeah, the one who'll be flying in Jannah. He had no arms. This Ja'far as-Sadiq is a different Ja'far as-Sadiq. He's a Shi'i Imam, and they say Ja'fari's school of fiqh from the Shi'is come from this. So according to Abu Zahra, who has written extensively on the life, the Shi'i Imams have written on the subject, and neither of the two have written anything. So the Hanafis, for example, added istihsan and the custom urf to the Usul al-Fiqh, and the Malikis reduced the concept of ijma to ijma of Ahl al-Madinah only. That's not necessarily true. So you see the Maliki scholars later on, they did accept ijma. But early, of course, the Madani ijma of Ahl al-Madinah, that's definitely a source of fiqh. So none departed significantly from the basic principles which the Shafi'i had articulated.
But Ustad, would you say it was a source of fiqh or is a source of fiqh? Can it still be used to derive fiqh today?
Ijma.
Ijma of Ahl al-Madinah, Amal of Ahl
Well,
al-Madinah.
yeah. Basically, whatever has been received from us has already been done anyway. So that's been
Right.
outlined in the Maliki opinions. Like in the Mudawwana, you'll see the opinions of Malik have already been extracted by the people either at his time or those who came immediately after him.
Yeah, so I'm saying as in our contemporary times we face more issues and we need more fiqh, quote unquote. Can you use this Madinian consensus as a source of fiqh? Or
Yeah,
is
but
that not done?
what I'm trying to say is basically all of the ijma of Ahl al-Madinah, they've already been documented.
Right.
And they've already been used for things.
So it was a source, not is a source. Would you say that's correct?
Um, yeah, but again, if a new ijma came about, there is no new ijma. But for example, we found some lost hadith or something, then theoretically would be a source.
So you theoretically you'd say it can be a source of fiqh, new fiqh to come about.
Yeah, in the Maliki school.
Right.
But generally, if there was an ijma from in the Sahaba, if there's a consensus, then all of the schools would apply anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the difference between usul and qawaid fiqhiyah. You want to carry on reading?
Yasin, he's muting himself.
I'm just eating an apple at the moment.
All right, I'll read. It says the maxims of fiqh refer to a body of abstract rules which are derived from the detailed study of the fiqh itself. They consist of a theoretical guidelines in the different areas of fiqh such as evidence, transactions, matrimonial law, etc. And as such, they are an integral part of fiqh and they are totally separate from usul al-fiqh.
Yeah. So basically, they are just abstract rules, general rules, and they are derived from the study of fiqh itself. So what came first, fiqh or usul al-fiqh? In this definition. Qawaid fiqhiyah or fiqh?
The qawaid fiqhiyah.
Qawaid, no, the fiqh came first because the qawaid fiqhiyah were extracted from the fiqh. You get me? So it seems like backwards.
Right.
It seems back. Why would you go forward
Yeah.
backwards? But the reason why they did that, they recognized the themes in the law. So if new situations came about, they could apply it to new situations.
So qawaid fiqhiyah are general rules, you'd say.
Yeah.
And usul al-fiqh is?
I mean, qawaid fiqhiyah, usul al-fiqh, people, they say they're the same thing. Of course, usul is the dalail fiqhiyah in terms of the rules. Yeah? But the qawaid fiqhiyah are just the maxims of fiqh.
Would you say that they are a result of usul al-fiqh?
Yeah.
The same way fiqh is itself?
Yep. So as
Right.
they're integral part of fiqh and totally separate from usul al-fiqh. So remember what I said, usul al-fiqh with the four basically sources. Qawaid fiqhiyah is basically looking at these four sources and then looking at the results of those and then making rules from them.
Right.
Yeah. So this is kind of the difference between that. You want to carry on?
Okay, so over 200 legal maxims have been collected and compiled in works known as Al-Ashbah wal Nadha'ir.
Al-Ashbah wa Nadhair. That's a book by uh,
Imam Suyuti and
Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi. So this basically they wrote back in the days. You'll see that sometimes famous books, right?
yeah.
They have the same name, but they're written by different people. Give me. Do you know any famous examples?
Um,
The Muwatta.
aha. There's
Imam
one.
Malik's times, there were a lot of people writing Muwattas.
ما كان لله بقي.
Yeah. So he said, like the famous one that was quoted, that so people asked him that, why are you writing a Muwatta when there's so many people that have written Muwatta? And what did he say?
ما كان لله بقي.
Ma kana lillahi yabqa. Whichever one had a good intention that was written for the sake of Allah shall remain. And in the end, his one remained in it. Also, a book, Fathul Bari.
Yeah.
Fathul Bari Shar Sahih al-Bukhari was actually, there was another one
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He told
titled
me.
at the same time that was written. At the same time. And it was actually written before Ibn Hajar's one. You know who it was written by?
You did tell us. I can't remember.
Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali.
Wow.
So he's the guy who also wrote, the famous Islamic monks thing.
Yeah.
He wrote that book as well. He wrote a book called Fathul Bari, commenting on Sahih al-Bukhari. Right, the most famous one is obviously Ibn Hajar's one, and I think we even reached him Ibn Hajar, this
So he
person.
was aware of it.
He was aware of it. Allahu Alam, but that's what's been transmitted to us. He was aware that this name was already come to pass. Allah Ta'ala Alam, we know the most famous one. That's why not necessarily the first one is the most famous one. It could
Ah,
be that the second one that was written became the most famous, but that's because of its own merits. Allah Ta'ala Alam. Again, Fathul Bari, the second one, Fathul Bari, by Ibn Hajam Hanbali, that's still in circulation and it can be purchased and it's
ah.
available. Widely available and people quote
Have you
it.
read it?
Quoted. I've read parts of it. People have quoted it. In I think when I was studying Riyadh al-Salihin,
Yeah.
a scholar who wrote a commentary to that, he relied heavily upon Fathul Bari by Ibn Hajar Hanbali, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali.
Ah.
Okay, can I carry on?
So he said 100 of these have been adopted in the introductory section, i.e., the first 100 articles of the Ottoman Majalla.
Hmm.
He says the name Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya may resemble the expression Usool Ul Fiqh, but the former is not a part of the latter, and the two are totally different from one another. A comparison between Usool Ul Fiqh and Usool Al Qanun will indicate that these two disciplines have much in common with one another. What's Usool Al Qanun?
Usul al-Qanun is Qanun basically means the same thing as Usul al-Fiqh. Sorry, Qanun is Qawaid.
Qawa'id.
Yeah, the principles
So,
of law.
so a comparison between the two will indicate
He translated it a bit later on. They say principle of secular law.
that's
Qanun is
Qanun.
basically, the rules that you have.
Yeah.
The Qanun. It's an Urdu word as well. It'd be like law.
So are they the maxims themselves? You call them Qanun?
No, no, no. It means like what is the law of the land.
Okay. Okay.
Secular law. That's what they've translated later on, but they explain it.
So, although they are different in other respects, they resemble one another in that both are concerned with the methodology of law and the rules of deduction and interpretation. They are not concerned with the detailed rules of the law itself.
Hmm.
So, although the general objectives of Usul al-Fiqh and Usul al-Qanun, the principles of secular law, are similar, the former is mainly concerned with the Quran, Sunnah, consensus, and analogy. The sources of Sharia are on the whole well defined and almost exclusive in the sense that a rule of law or a hukum shari'i may not be originated outside the general scope of its authoritative sources on grounds, for example, of rationality alone. For aql
Okay,
is not,
I think I know why they mentioned this. They mentioned this because they want to distinguish between hukum wadi and hukum akli. So basically, there was uh, qanun.
this mantiq coming in now.
Yeah. So they basically are trying to say that the law, secular law, the non-religious law, very similar to usul al-fiqh, right? Usul al-fiqh
Right.
is concerned with Quran, Sunnah, consensus, ijma, and qiyas. But the other one is not concerned with that, usul al-qanun, which are basically the principles of secular law. But they do say that in Islam, the fiqh, the rules, the sharia is very similar
to the rule to the concept of common law,
Right.
which is basically that the system of continental law, which is basically that the jurist has latitude, enjoys this latitude, that they can understand different themes, and sometimes they might not always go with the general ruling for every single thing.
Right.
Based on the situation, they can basically use different opinions, and this is kind of the subtlety I think which they're hinting at. But they should be a bit more clearer. What do
Right.
you think?
So, where were we? He says, for aql is not an independent source of law in Islam. Usul al-Fiqh is thus founded in divine ordinances and the acknowledgement of God's authority over the conduct of man. Anything to add there?
Not really. Aql is not basically your aql, although it does have a place in the Sharia. It's not that there's one of the asal of Sharia is aql, but it can be in the usul of Qanun that one of the asal of usul al Qanun secular aql, or this makes
Right.
rational sense. Sometimes it might not make rational sense in Sharia. For example, wiping the foot on the top, that doesn't make rational sense, and a few
Right.
other things. And like rakat of salah, that does not make rational sense. Why four rakat instead of five and not three rakat, etc.
Right.
Mm.
So the sources of Sharia may not be overruled on the grounds of either rationality or the requirement of social conditions. There is admittedly a measure of flexibility in Usul al-Fiqh which allows for necessary adjustments in the law to accommodate social change.
Yeah. So remember, I was saying before about fiqh in general, usul fiqh in general. That it's
Right.
different in the sense. Sorry,
It's
of Islam in general. The jurist does enjoy this sort of form of latitude that maybe wasn't didn't exist. Jew.
so what were you saying? Didn't catch.
Hmm?
Didn't catch what you just said.
What was that? I was saying that the Islamic system is
Right.
similar to the common law over the continental system, which is codified law. So you have like these are the rules. You have to do this particular thing at this particular time.
Right.
But in Islam, you have the system of law is more similar to common law, which is basically that the judge has latitude and how the scripture is interpreted. At times, there might be an exception to the rule. At times, there might be this particular situation where
Right.
we don't apply the general rule. Do you understand? So I think
Yeah.
this is what they meant here when they were saying that there's some sort of flexibility when it comes and adjustments that you can have to accommodate to different situations.
Like maslaha.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay.
So yeah, I seen you want to carry on reading now.
From
I'm gonna invite Nahid. He said he wants to join. I don't know if it's a wise decision. What do you think, Shay?
He can join afterwards. He can listen from the beginning and it would be easier.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll send him the link afterwards, inshallah.
the legislative origin of an Islamic state cannot abrogate the Quran or the Sunnah, although it may abrogate a law which is based on maslaha or istihsan, etc. Sovereignty in Islam is the prerogative. What does that mean?
Prerequisite, isn't it?
No, no, prerogative.
Prerogative. Hold on, sorry.
Prerogative
Oh, prerogative. What? Sovereignty of the.
of Almighty God alone.
Oh, the prerogative, the right.
The right. Sovereignty in Islam is the prerogative of Almighty God alone. He is the He is the absolute arbiter of values, and it is His will that determines good and evil, right and wrong.
Okay, so basically, this is. Remember, I said to you guys, explained to you guys when we were doing the fiqh class a couple of years ago,
Right.
that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the muta that. He is the one that you follow in terms of essence. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by virtue of him transmitting what Allah wants you to do. We
Right.
don't follow the Prophet ﷺ with that. We follow him because Allah subhanahu he follows and he's a vessel for transmitting to us what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to us. قُلْ إِن كُنتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. By you following the messenger of Allah, you are in fact following Allah. But Allah is the mutabid that, right? That you are following Allah in terms of Allah's essence, and it's Allah who determines the good and right and wrong, the evil, etc. And this is basically something that's the difference between Ash'ari and Maturidi school of thought, and they say the Mu'tazili school of thought.
Oh yeah.
Islam bring good or evil. Like for example, is it rational to understand something good and evil, or is this a system in the law that recognizes good and evil? What do you guys think?
So I think the Mu'tazilis would say it can only be recognized with the ration, and the Ash'ariya would say that only Allah can define what is right and wrong, and the Maturidiyya say it's both, isn't it?
The Maturidi what?
Say it's both, that Allah defines what is right and wrong, but the ration can also recognize what is right and wrong.
Yeah, the Maturidi are sort of in the middle when it comes to this.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, and I think I'd tie towards their view in that sense. That there are some things, for example, salah and things like that, which salah, saum, and things like that, which if Islam didn't come, you wouldn't understand them to be good and evil. Or things like stealing, things like, for example, zina, fornication. Every human being knows it's wrong. Lying, every human being knows it's wrong. You don't need to tell people, oh yeah, it's wrong to lie. People just recognize that.
Yeah.
You understand? So this is basically good and evil in that sense. That does it exist? Did it exist before Islam? Or how is the good determined? So we have, I mean, we do say, okay, any scholar of Islam, right? They would say, yeah, good is determined by the scriptural sources, right? Our way of looking at scripture, we can derive good from it. You have the notion of seeking the good, the mechanism of the good that is sort of enshrined in the law. So in the law, in Islam, we have a mechanism of good that is enshrined within there. But that is basically from the creativeness of the jurist himself. And there's a notion of good that is not mechanistic, and it cannot be comprehended by our conscience and reason. And this is the mechanism of good that is taklifi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it's bad, that's why it's bad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it's good, that's why it's good. But the scholars did understand that sometimes a hukam of Sharia might not actually be good in that sense, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended good when we look at the maqasid. So the maqasid Sharia are basically the themes of good and bad in Sharia. You guys understand? It's quite a difficult thing to grasp. I think to summarize, I would say that good and bad is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, but recognition of good and bad, can we do that with the aql? To an extent you can, right? But in other things you cannot. Like I think it was in Hamlet, Shakespeare said on the tongue of Hamlet that there is no good or evil unless you think it so. So it's a person who thinks and determines what's good or bad through their own conscience and through their own thing. And this is why we'll understand later on. Istihsan looks at good and evil, right? Looks at, no, Allah didn't want to make your life hard in this particular sense, although the dalil might be pointing to that when you look at the letter of the law. But when you look at the spirit of the law, the dalil is saying something else, right? It's like Allah's not saying
So these are sort of kind of axioms which must always remain and you must adhere to. Like justice must always remain, even if the letter of the law doesn't provide it. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think that's mentioned here. Is it? You can carry on reading it. You're spending too long on this.
Yeah, see there. Yasin? I'm having problems going back on the video. I went off the video. I don't know how you get on it.
Sorry?
How do I I've gone off the video, now I chat.
Oh,
I don't know, come back on it.
Click on it. Click on the bottom right hand corner.
One second. Yasin can carry on reading if you want.
Because I can't see the screen.
Just open up the book in your tablet.
One.
You see now?
Yeah. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Um,
We've gone through this, haven't we?
No, no, no.
Right, so shall I read from although the consensus?
Yeah.
Although the consensus of ijma of the community or of its learned members is a recognized source of law in Islam, in the final analysis, ijma is subservient to divine revelation and can never overrule the explicit injunctions of the Quran and Sunnah.
So what that's trying to say is, although Islam, ijma is a source of Islam, it will never go against the Quran and Sunnah.
okay. It's secondary to them, yeah?
Yep.
Islamic jurisprudence is is not confined to commands and prohibitions.
Confined.
As Islamic jurisprudence is not confined to commands and prohibitions, and far less to commands which originate in a court of law. Its scope is much wider as it is concerned not only with what a man must do or must not do, but also with what he ought to do or what he ought not to do,
Right.
and the much larger area where his decision to do or to avoid doing something
Own
is
right.
his own prerogative.
So basically, what this is trying to say, I think this is a message that we as students of knowledge need to get out to the larger community, that fiqh doesn't just tell you what you have to do and what you don't do. Fiqh is actually your ethical spectrum that you use to understand the things in day-to-day life, to understand the matters in day-to-day life. It's your ethical spectrum. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Is it better for me to do this? Is it better for me not to do this? It's Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Ma khuyyira bayna amrayni illa ikhtara aysarahuma." That he sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't given the options between two things except he chose the most easiest from amongst them, so long as they didn't conform to sin. Right? Then he obviously avoided the one that conformed to sin. But this notion of choice was exhibited by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. That there is choice in Islam, but it's up to you at the end of the day what you choose to do. Even if you do the less preferable thing, it's still the Sharia and the fiqh will show you the scope and sort of the spectrum for these sort of things. So it's
So what was it? The fiqh is your ethical spectrum to understanding.
to understanding our day-to-day matters. So Islam is
Uh,
not binary. It's not the sort of dichotomy between right and wrong. It's
It's
wider
not
than
black and white, basically.
you choices. Yeah, it gives you choices. Okay, the two approaches to usul fiqh.
two approaches to the study of usul fiqh: theoretical and deductive.
Okay,
The main
this
difference between
is theoretical and deductive. Just to stop you there, it's basically there's a way where you have sort of fiqh that we looked at. We studied using the deductive method, which I think is more beneficial. Which
Right.
is basically you have rulings and you see, okay, you try and work out the process from the end result, right? You try and take it apart and you see how it works. And this is how people learn as well, trying to dissect it. So do you know how in university we learn the pathology and the physiology of the human body through opening up the human body itself, right?
Instead of them telling you first, this is what's in it.
Yeah, instead of them telling, they're like, nah, you open it up. Remember, I told you guys when we had to like
Yeah.
crush the ribs itself. So
Yeah.
we have to open it up. We have to check for ourselves rather than them guiding us every single step. Obviously, they'll guide us in terms of clarification to clarify, but it's sort of you going through it yourself, analyzing it, dissecting, putting the pieces, pulling the pieces apart and putting them back together. This
What are the
is
two Arabic terms for these two approaches? What would you call it in Arabic?
theoretical. It's sort of theoretical. I'm not sure, you know.
Okay. That's fine. Chala.
I'll hold on 1 second. I'm just thinking. Theoretical, what could it be?
it'll make it easy to understand.
Hmm.
So you know the Shafi'i school, do they not at all do istihsan?
They would do. They would do, but they wouldn't call it istihsan.
Alright,
I'm not sure. When it comes to me, I'll let you guys know what's theoretical
deductive.
deduction. Yeah, but let's just carry on for now.
I think Nahad's joined.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, chalo, carry on.
Um, Theoretical inductive. The main difference between these approaches is one of orientation rather than substance, whereas the former is primarily concerned with the exposition of theoretical doctrines. The latter is pragmatic in the sense that theory is formulated in light of its application to relevant issues. The difference between the two approaches resembles the work of a legal draftsman when it is compared to the work of a judge.
Okay, do you guys understand that? So someone
Yeah,
who's
But the lawyer,
writing the laws compared to someone who's executing the laws.
yeah.
somebody who
Who's writing the laws compared to someone who's executing the laws.
the
Someone
judge is executing the law, yeah.
who's putting them to pass.
Right.
Okay.
So the judge you'd say is the deductive method in this situation, yeah?
Yeah. No, the judge will be the deductive. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're right.
Chalo, carry on.
Okay. And legal draftsman is a lawyer, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so he would look at the theory and then produce the fiqh from it, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Someone who's
The
writing.
former is
That's what I
made
mean.
the former is mainly concerned with the exposition of principles, whereas the latter tends to develop a synthesis between the principle and the requirements of a particular case.
Yeah.
The theoretical the theoretical approach to the study of Usul al-Fiqh is adopted by the Shafi'i school and the Mutakallimun, that is, the ulama of Kalam and the Mu'tazila. The deductive approach is, on the other hand, mainly attributed to the Hanafis.
Zillah ba'd.
I think a reason for that could be that the Hanafi school is applied a lot in terms of states and governments. Like it was the states, the judge would actually rule by the Hanafi school a lot in a lot of parts of the world. So that's why the Hanafi school would be a lot developed compared to the others in that sense. Obviously, there were people that judged according to the Shafi, Maliki, etc. I think in
But
terms of the evolution, the Hanafi school is a lot more evolved, and that's why they chose the deductive method in terms of
because the
understanding.
dynamics you face and how far did it reach, isn't it?
Hmm.
Crazy.
Gee.
Right. The Shafi'is and the Mutakallimun are inclined to engage in a complex issue in complex issues of a philosophical character, which may or may not contribute to the development of practical rules of fiqh, such as the isma of the prophets prior to their prophetic mission. What does that mean?
Isma is basically
Fallibility.
innocence. They are
Pardon?
free from sin. Isma means innocence, free from sin.
Oh,
So,
isma. Okay.
so the Prophet ﷺ, the prophets were free from sin before prophethood.
Right.
So how does that
And
how
what?
does that then factor into usul al-fiqh?
This is basically, we're talking about Shafis and Mutakallimun. It's basically the issue of kalam, where were the prophets basically always a prophet, even before prophethood were they prophets, or after prophethood? Because after prophethood, generally there's a consensus that they were free from sin, but before prophethood would mean that were the prophets always prophets, or did they become a prophet when they received prophethood?
But how would that affect fiqh and usul al-fiqh?
Theoretical, isn't it? Theoretical. That's why Shafis and
Right.
Mutakallimun.
One of the questions is on that, isn't it? How isma and ijma play a role. Isma plays a role in ijma.
Yeah. Meaning, would that be so? Would you accept, for example, this could be another theoretical thing that could you accept the sayings of prophets before their prophethood if they weren't ma'soom, or their mistakes? Could you learn from them if they weren't ma'soom? Things like that. But obviously, it doesn't have many practical implications. So,
What would you say from your knowledge
what do you mean?
on that? Were the prophets uh, masoom before the message?
I think so. This is another thing between Ashari and Maturidi that the Asharis, for example, they would say Umar bin Khattab, even when he was worshipping praying behind the idols, praying in front of the idols, he was still Allah's beloved at that time.
Wow.
Right? He was
Ash'aris would say that.
always, this is basically is iman hal or is iman maqam. So they would say According to one school, they would say Iman is a maqam. So prophethood is a maqam, which means they were always there at that point, even though they didn't know it yet. But those who say Iman is a hal, they would say no, it's not possible. And then there comes a whole thing in Kalam when you do Aqidah or study it. Can you say Ana mu'minun inshallah because is Iman a hal or a maqam or not? And this is basically this theoretical things that it doesn't have much implication, but this is the implication that it has. Is
So
Iman a
that
hal or is it a maqam?
so that's what they're saying, that these theoretical stuff, they don't have much kind of fruits in the end in
Yeah,
terms of practicality.
yeah. God?
Right, such as and logical and linguistic matters of remote relevance to the practical rules. The Hanafis,
Exactly.
ex-
So they don't
the Hanafis expound the principles of
Usul.
usul in conjunction with fiqh. In short, the theoretical approach tends to envisage.
yeah.
What does that mean?
Implicit is basically understand. Can you see my screen? That's what it means.
That's cool. How did you do that?
What was that?
Or it could be Can you see?
Yeah.
I could just look it up and it goes straight away, but I don't know why it's not working now. I'll show you a word if you don't know what it means. You can just check it out. You can just Google it. Contemplate or conceive of as a possibility or a desirable future event.
Oh, okay. Envisage.
Yeah. Form a mental picture of.
Okay.
Create a vision. Yeah.
Right. In short, the theoretical approach tends to envisage usul al-fiqh as an independent discipline to which the fiqh must conform, whereas the deductive approach attempts to relate the usul al-fiqh to the detailed issues of the furu' al-fiqh.
Saj, you want
When,
to
for
try to?
example, the Hanafis find a principle of usul to be in conflict with an established principle of fiqh, they are inclined to adjust the theory to the extent that the conflict in question is removed.
Saj, you want to just explain that? I found that confusing.
So basically here they're saying that whenever the asal, this is what I was saying remember before about the jurist enjoys some latitude.
Yeah.
It's like the system of common law opposed to the system of continental law, where the
Right.
jurist doesn't really apply to the rule of the law, the letter of the law all the time. Or
He
the,
has some leeway, doesn't he?
yeah. So sometimes, like there might be an established principle of fiqh, which is basically this is the rule, but the theory might be against that. So
And he
then
wasn't.
they'd harmonize it in such a way they'll make it they'll make it they'll do jama, which means they'll harmonize it in such a way that they act upon both of them.
Can
And
you give an example?
examples would be, for example, the La Salata illa bi Fatihatil Kitab and
Right.
Ma Tayassara min. I explained all that, remember?
Yeah.
Fatiha is wajib, it's not fard because of that. Because
Okay.
Allah says, Faqra ma tayassara min al-Quran.
So it's a sort of compromise between the two. Is that what the Hanafi way is?
Yeah, to harmonize between the narrations,
Right.
which is a very kind of noble thing to do in Islam, where you act upon everything in that sense.
So it's like the placing of the hands in the salah. The way the Hanafis do it is conforming with the different ahadith. Is that what you'd say?
The hand thing is a bit different because that's based on narration, isn't it? Where
Well, Mufti Abu Layth was saying there's no specific narration as to the way we hold it specifically with
you mean
the
wada and thingy, wada versus placing versus qabad, wada
no,
versus,
he think in fact the way the Hanafis place it is in such a way that part of it is holding the wrist and the forearm and the hand,
oh,
which
you
is
mean
the
the
separate
jama,
hadith.
final wada wal thingy. Basically, placing the hands is wada, and qabad is holding the hands.
I
So
know, no, I'm not talking about qabad. He was saying that the Hanafis,
yeah,
there's a hadith of the Prophet grabbed his hand with his hand,
yeah,
and then with his wrist, and then with his arm. So he said the Hanafis combine all of them, and they hold the hand in such a way, like with the three fingers and everything like that.
yeah. That's called qabad. When you hold your finger, qabad can also mean putting your hands together, but qabad also means your hands when you put them between your fingers. That's called
Yeah.
qabad also. Wada is placing your hand upon your right hand.
Okay. So that is what's happening there. That's
Yeah. So Sheikh I've got his book here. Sheikh Albani, Nasiruddin Al Albani says that the Hanafis don't really act upon this wada and qabad because they do both. Or this is basically an example of this, that they do both.
Ah, we do react for both.
So this is basically Sheikh Albani being a literalist more than someone who has a deep understanding of Usul al Fiqh.
Yeah.
You get me? This is actually example of this. I'll try and find it in the book and I'll send it to you guys after. But Sheikh
Yeah.
Albani in this his book, Sifatu Salat al-Nabi Kanaka Taraha. I've got it here actually. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. Yes. Actually, you guys carry on. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
10 past. Okay. Let's finish this page and then we'll call it a day.
Chalo. It says the three of the most important works which adopt the theoretical approach to Usul al-Fiqh are Al-Mu'tamad fi Usul al-Fiqh by the Mu'tazili scholar Abu al-Husayn al-Basri, Kitab al-Burhan of the Shafi'i scholar Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, and Al-Mustasfa by Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. These three works were later summarized by Fakhruddin al-Razi in his work entitled Al-Mahsul. Saifuddin al-Amadi's larger work Al-Ihkam fi Usul al-Ahkam is an annotated summary of the three pioneering works referred to above. The earliest Hanafi work on Usul al-Fiqh is Al-Kitab fi al-Usul by Abu al-Hasan al-Kharki. Is that right, Kharki? Or?
Yeah. Sorry. Where were we?
The earliest work, Hanafi work on Usul al-Fiqh is Kitab fi al-Usul by Abu al-Hasan al-Kharki.
Al-Karachi.
Karachi.
Yeah.
Which was followed by the Usul al-Jassas by Abu Bakr Razi al-Jassas.
Usul al-Jassas also called Al-Fusul fi Usul. Al-Fusul fi Usul. And this is one of the earliest works in Hanafi school when it comes to Usul, and it's still referred to. We still refer to it.
Right.
It's a very complex work and advanced also. But when you want to prove things from the Hanafi school Usul, you would use that generally.
Right. So Fakhr al-Islam al-Bazdawi, his well-known work Bazdawi. His well-known work Usul al-Bazdawi is also written in conformity with the Hanafi approach to the study of this discipline. This was followed by an equally outstanding contribution by Shamsuddin al-Sarakhsi, bearing the title Usul al-Sarakhsi. Shall we finish this section or?
Let's finish this section and call it.
So the next phase is marked by the attempt to combine the two approaches. One work which attempted to combine al-Bazdawi's Usul and al-Abadi's Ihkam was completed by Muzaffar ad-Din as-Sa'ati. Is that correct?
Sa'ati, yeah.
Whose title Badi'un Nizam or Badi'un Nizam, not too sure. Al-Jami' al-Bayan Usul al-Bazdawi wal-Ihkam is a
الجامع بين الأصول البزدوي والأحكام.
Yeah, is a self-explanatory as to the approach the author has taken.
So
Another work which combined
what he did, he tried to like combine between the two approaches,
the theoretical and the deductive.
There was this really good story about Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni. I just forgot what it was though.
Ghazali's teacher.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's something really.
I remember you explained once why he's called Imam al-Haramain. What was it?
I think it's because he was there at the time, innit?
Well, how come he's just so stuck? Like, even to this day, nobody else is called Imam al-Haramain.
Oh, I remembered that story.
وكان مدينة.
Yeah, Al-Ghazali said about Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, right?
Yeah.
لو كان نبي لو what did he say? He goes,
Feeling some hefty words coming now.
لو كان نبيا في عصر الجويني, if there was a prophet at the time of Juwayni, فما كان إلا هو, then it wouldn't be except for him.
Wow.
Look at that, bro. That's what you call a legend.
That deserves not a
रिसालत का सिलसिला बंद हो गया.
Another work which combined the two was Sadr al-Sharia by Abdullah ibn Masud al-Bukhari, bearing the title At-Tawdih, which is in return a summary of Usul al-Bazdawi, al-Mahsul, al-Mukhtasar al-Muntaha of the Maliki jurist Abu Umar Uthman ibn Hajib. Yeah. Three others, Jamal Jawami'.
Ibn Hajib is a famous name. You guys know any other books he wrote?
It says the three others is Jamal. Did you ask a question?
Yeah, I said, do you know any other books that Ibn Hajib wrote? It's a famous scholar. That is great.
Should we? Is the question.
Yeah, we'll come afterwards anyway, inshallah.
So he says three others: Jamul Jawami of the Shafi Juristology Subki, At-Tahrir of Kamaluddin.
Jamul Jawami, again, it's a name that a lot of people have written the same book by. As-Suyuti wrote a book called Jamul Jawami.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He combined all the hadith from the beginning of his time until his time, every hadith that was available at his time, and he wrote Jamul Jawami. And then remember, I said people don't reinvent the wheel; they just add to it.
Yeah.
Later on, a scholar named Ali al-Muttaqi al-Hindi wrote another book. You know what it's called?
Jamul Jawami.
No. He wrote Kanzul Ummal,
Ah,
every encyclopedia of hadith
subhanallah.
based on Jamul Jawami that Suyuti wrote, which was basically his encyclopedia of hadith book. They only had all the hadith up to his time that was available to him. Remember, he died in 9/11. So again, a Shafi would have been aware of, sorry, a Suyuti would have been aware of this name, Jamul Jawami, because
Died in 9/11.
Suyuti died in 771 and he died in 9/11. Okay. And then
So, At-Tahrir of Kamaluddin ibn al-Humam al-Hanafi.
Kamaluddin ibn Humam, the author of Fathul Qadir, died in 860
Oh, okay.
after the Hijrah. He's one of the famous, he's called Khatamul Muhaqqiqeen, the
Wow.
seal of the Muhaqqiqeen. And also, again, because it's Usul, there was a lot of well, his own student, um, Ibn Qutlubugha, he said that لا تقبل تفردات أستاذي, that don't accept the solitary opinion of my Ustad. Again, we'll see in his methodology of Usul why he said that, because he was more inclined towards this. Look, can you see this? This is basically what they try. These scholars try
Yeah.
to sort of
Combine the two ways.
find between the ways, and this is why his student probably said that because he combined between the ways so much, he didn't stay true to the original Hanafi thing. But obviously, that's his own student's opinion, and I
Right.
think Kamaluddin bin Humam actually was more true to the Hanafi usul of
Of
in
deduction.
general, because the thing, and another thing to know about him is he was also like more hadithi orientated. So maybe at certain times when his analysis of the usul didn't conform to the hadithi understanding, he would take the hadithi understanding, which is actually an asal in the Hanafi school itself.
Wow.
So this is just something regarding that. And then you have Musallam al-Thubut, which is
Of,
famous.
of the Hanafi jurist Muhibbuddin ibn Abd al-Shakur.
This is a later one that came not long ago. Musallam al-Thubut, still quoted.
Right.
So
So finally, this list would be deficient without mentioning Abu Ishaq Ibrahim al-Shatibi's Al-Muwafaqat, which is comprehensive and perhaps unique in its attention to the philosophy, hikmah, and the objectives of tashri' maqasid.
with the Maqasid Sharia. Rashad Bey's Muwafaqat, I've got that. I don't know if you guys seen. It's quite interesting, that kind of book. It's got a lot of interesting anecdotes and things like that of a Shatibi's time. Remember, Shatibi also, he was not the same Shatibi, the Qiraat Shatibi. He came a
Right.
lot afterwards. He was a Shatibi that lived in Andalusia. He lived in a cosmopolitan society where the Maliki school was basically, at his time, he saw that whatever the ruling was, it was what the Maliki scholars said. It wasn't going back to the Quran or Hadith. So he
Wow.
tried to sort of not reinvent, but recapitalize what was there in the earlier sources, and then try to understand and take from where they took from.
Right.
Right, and this is why it was a cause of a lot of controversy during his time as well, where people started, he was one of those unique kind of guys. Again, Ibn Hazm was the same.
Is it like the Ibn Taymiyyah
Like
for the
he wasn't as
philosophy?
he wasn't as extreme as Ibn Taymiyyah in his sort of defiance.
Yeah.
It's similar. You'll understand when we reach certain sections. Like for example, in the Usul al Hadith class that we have on Wednesdays,
Yeah.
mentioned that Al-Shatibi disagrees with there being a mutawatir hadith. He says
Yeah.
mutawatir lafzi does not exist. There's a quote I've got from him actually. I've got it.
Yeah. I remember I watched that part of yours.
Yeah, but I didn't mention the quote in the class. I've got the quote here.
So he says the only thing that was mutawatir is the ma'nawi.
Yep. Took a screenshot, I think.
أدلة الشرعية. Is that there?
I don't know what it is actually. Maybe, no,
Is that a screenshot of Hamza?
yeah, I think I can't find it unless I'll forward it on to you guys. So basically, how can I put it?
Says I heard this Arab Sheikh say Ibn Hazm radiallahu anhu. Then I realized there's a companion called Ibn Hazm.
Hmm. People get confused between Abu Hazm and Ibn Hazm also. Abu Hazm is a famous guy came before. Okay. So Ashari, he says that it was theoretical in nature, hadith, hadith mutawatir. And this is basically going against the ijma.
Oh, controversy at its best. So, should we carry on? الأدلة الشرعية.
Just leave it at there, but just remember where we did it up to.
Okay.
We'll call it a subhanallah, bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa